Sup fam, it's Ted, and today we are going to talk about HDAs, Houdini Digital Assets. First thing I'm going to do just before we get started is make a geo and go inside of it and show you a digital asset, an HDA. I am going to grab one of the ones that we have made. I'm looking for coffee table. There we go, coffee table A. So a Houdini digital asset, very simply, is a group of Houdini nodes wired up together with parameters exposed or not. In this case, there are some exposed params, and this HDA will make whatever the nodes inside, tell it to make. So if I just so we can see what the nodes do a little bit easier, allow the editing of the contents, and I can dive inside. This is a pretty standard Houdini kind of a modeling a coffee table, modeling an anything setup from primitives where you're going around and generating boxes and combining them and giving them UVs and making materials and, all good, right? So why might you want to make an HDA? Coffee table. Maybe you don't always want a coffee table that's the same size. Maybe for one set you want it to be this 0.666 number. Maybe for the next one we want something a little bit more square. That's 0.2, not 2. Want something a little bit more square, right? As I update numbers here in my parameters, I also get new geometry, and I didn't have to do any additional work. And if I go to my UVs, I've got good UVs for the light map and good UVs for the materials. And I'm going to come in here again and I'm going to make this number 1, and I'm going to get all new UVs, right? And I'm not going to have to go and even click another button that says unwrap somewhere or anything like that. It's really rather handy. I can also redo some of the noise that's in the bottom of the coffee table there. So in addition to getting kind of like mechanical benefits, we also can make it a little bit easier to art direct, right? Because maybe we are going to be working with an artist who isn't the kind of person that is going to set up a noise network for themselves, right? But they're definitely the kind of person who would sit here and plug these numbers all day and just get the most beautiful bottom. Wouldn't be that one. Get the most beautiful bottom cooking for this coffee table. Which brings me to the next super cool thing about Houdini Digital Assets. This is that Houdini Digital Assets are able to be used in other pieces of software. And these are currently the Unreal Engine, Unity, Maya 3D Studio Max, and Cinema 4D. The Cinema 4D plugin, last time I checked in with it, was running on 17.5 and not 18, and I don't think that's changed. So if you're a Cinema 4D user, just keep in mind that you're going to want to, I believe, install it specifically through Cinema 4D. But for everybody else, all you need to do is go to the side effects website, and I'll just make a new window here. Go to the side effects website, and you can see, over here in the engine plugins, this is the link I usually send people. There's all these plugins, and then you could choose to either buy Houdini Engine if you're buying it as a studio, or I believe as an individual making more than $100,000 a year. You should, check the website here and make sure that you're buying the appropriate license. Or if you're an indie user, you actually can just download the engine for free and just get right to using these plugins, right? Because what's great isn't really only running it inside of Houdini, although I'm going to be honest, I really love sitting here and having an idea and thinking to myself, I'm going to make an HDA, and then checking the list and going, oh, we already made an HDA, and starting my idea maybe that 45 minutes or hour and a half or a couple hours or whatever down the field. So when it comes to the Unreal Engine, go back to this window that we just made. I'm going to pull up the Houdini Engine Unreal documentation. And yep, it's a very purple link. It's a very dark purple because I click it a lot. The engine plugins, they generally on my phone. Actually, I got my phone in my hand reading the engine documentation, and then my computer open doing some Unreal stuff. You will want to take a look at this as you're getting to work with the engine, right? I'm assuming that you've already got a little bit of Houdini knowledge. On the off chance that you don't, there's a ton of really great tutorials out there to help you get onboarded with this software, but we're just going to charge ahead as though everybody here does. So Houdini can draw a whole lot of things. Houdini could, take this table and light it on fire and generate smoke and then like explode it because it turned out that the legs of the table were packed with C4, and when the heat in the leg like got to a certain place, you could, well, we can't do most of that with the Houdini engine, right? The Houdini engine is a little bit different for each implementation. So looking specifically at the Houdini engine for Unreal, what we've generally got access to is a really great collection of tools for world building, right? So if I click on inputs here, these are, just like we don't have inputs on this node, but if we were doing a terrain, which is what I'm going to be showing you after we do this coffee table here, you can either generate new material from an HDA, or you can process material that's already in the scene, right? So enough talking about that. Let's actually do some. The HDAs, when they get saved, live in, open my window, there we go, live in this folder, your users, and then documents, and then Houdini 18, and then OTLs. You could change this. I never have, and I probably wouldn't recommend it unless you're a relatively advanced Houdini user. I'm going to scroll down to my SVGS collection, grab coffee table A, and you know what? Instead of being like that and dragging it into the content browser, I'm going to make a folder. Call it HDA. This is a very empty project. There we go. SVGS, coffee table, HDA. And getting it cooking, getting it in the viewport is just like anything else in Unreal, as simple as dragging it and dropping it. And right now we're looking at it unlit, so we'll fix that in a moment. But right now it is cooking. And you can see if I try and move my viewport, I can't move my viewport. Houdini engine has to wake up. I find it generally runs faster after it's run the first time. And here we go. There's our coffee table. So I am going to go to just show me lit. Great, let's get the camera a little bit closer. Tone back our speed. There we go. We have a coffee table. And if we decide that we wanted it to maybe, be different, we wanted it to be square, just like we had it before, we can come over here and hit 2. So here's a funny thing though, is now that we're in Unreal, we no longer want to be working in our old numbers, right? So where before in Houdini we were hitting Z to make our table be different in depth. Over here in Unreal, as usual, we want to hit Y. So the Houdini engine will take care of that, that little flip for us, but it's something that you're going to want to keep in mind as an artist as you're working through it. We've got these other parameters here. You can see it baked a lot quicker that time. I'm going to set my top thickness just like a tiny bit thicker. Let's do 0.0325. So that's like a little bit chunkier on top. Great. And let's see, cross piece, size, malt. How do we feel about the thickness of this cross piece down here? I think it's okay, but I just want to make it different because I can. Great, a little bit bulkier to match that new top. And I think that I like this noise, so I am going to keep it the same. I'm going to hit Alt and drag out this fresh coffee table, right? And then just so I don't have two precisely identical coffee tables sitting next to each other in the scene, I'm going to offset the noise. There we go. Is 15 going to be enough? We're about to see. Yeah, I think 15 was enough. I don't think those are precisely the same. Great. Okay, cool. So it is as simple as that, right? Let's try an arrangement that's a little bit more complicated. I'm going to go to a project that we've already got. This guy right here. And great, we're in this empty template map. Let's get my world outliner back. I'm going to come to this HDA folder. You can see we've got quite a few more in here, and I am going to grab the terrain loader. Cool. So terrain loader, this is one that we made that I would say gets used probably more than any other. You know, it documents the joy of oldish computers. Builds. Let's try 4. I know 4 is good. Variation 1. And we will grab the combine. And we will hit. Actually, let's grab the. Try grabbing combine. The ping. Yep, so now it's making a land, and when it does make the land, we're not going to be able to see its height. That's because its height scale is going to need to be ticked up to 500. I just know that about this particular height field. Great, and there it is way up there. Let's just address that real quick, and we can actually do it right inside the HDA because I like to keep my landscapes at, let's do this, 0, 0, 0. What happens now? There we go. Great. And then we center it. So, oh, that number is really small. Here, let's just undo our set location. Hit F to focus on it, move our camera faster. There we go. So we want to do move our camera faster. Great, so now we could see we've got this landscape, but it doesn't have any materials on it. That's okay because we've also made an HDA for that. So this HDA, just real quick to describe what it's doing, is it's loading Houdini's terrain system and throwing a height field that in this case came from Gaia at it, and then just doing some very basic terrain processing, like giving it, you know, a workable resolution and letting us determine the size of the height field. So the next tool I'm going to drag out, I'm just going to put this on 0, 0, 0. The next tool I am going to drag out is Quick Land Mask. So Quick Land Mask goes out there and we put it on 0, 0, 0. Quick Land Mask, I was describing before, you could put inputs into an HDA. It takes a landscape input. You click here on landscape, and then it's going to start to cook. There we go. doing stuff. The Houdini engine is doing stuff. And when it's done, we're going to get another landscape. Great. And we see it's doing a little bit of Z fighting, right? And we don't want that. So I'm going to actually delete the terrain loader because I don't need to keep it around for what happens next, which is very simply putting a simple pre-made, I'll show you guys. There's not a whole lot happening here inside this landscape material, just a bunch of, you know, maps getting sent to different layers, just like a regular old one that you're going to paint. I am going to, without having adjusted anything yet, keep that in mind, I'm going to drag it onto landscape material. And some shaders, probably going to have to compile a little bit, but we've got a nicely sectioned out, light's kind of whack. Let's address that, just get a nice directional light in there. Great. We've got some mud and some rock and everything all split up. I've been finding it fun lately to actually paint on all of our grass and things like that. But let's say now that we had this empty landscape, we also wanted to, is this scatter? Yes, we also wanted to, you know, start instancing some stuff with it, right? We also made an HDA for that. And this one is called Quick Land Scatter, and it scatters. I'm going to also put it at 0, 0, 0. This one's kind of fun. So the way it works is you put a cube out in the world and you put it above the landscape. And I find it sometimes wants to be a little bit bigger, right? And then inside of Quick Land Scatter, we have it take an input number 1, a world outliner input. This is like my favorite feature of the Houdini engine right here. Is how easy it is to work with things that are already in the scene. And then from there, we pick our cube, and then we say, use current selection. And then there we go. It is going to start cooking. No, sorry. First one is a landscape. I got these backwards. First one is a landscape. So we're going to say, take landscape 1. And it's not going to have anything to scatter to. So this is something a little bit klutzy about the Houdini engine, and I'm glad it finally happened, is sometimes you will find yourself needing to enter a bunch of parameters in a row. When this comes up, right, we see it finish cooking with errors, we could hit Control-Alt-P. And while we hit Control-Alt-P, we are now pausing the engine cooking. So I'm going to set this to be a world outliner input, but the Houdini engine is actually what tells even things in the world outliner in this little details pane, like what they want to be doing. So I have to resume my cooking, right? And then I can start my selection, grab my cube, and say use current. And then it's going to start scattering. There we go. Perfect. So an example of a time when we would want to go ahead and pause what's happening is cool. So now we've got this forest made out of primitives right now, just so we can see where they go. Of elements. We might want to pause if, for example, I'm just going to do a couple. I'm not going to do all of them. We might want to pause if we wanted to start filling out some of these, because if we didn't, it would actually be starting to like redo everything for each of these, right? And that's not super helpful. So there we go. It's coming out rather nice, right? A tree. Let's get a couple more trees in there. Nice. And nice. Great. And there we go. And it is as easy as that, you know, if we just wanted to keep on going with it. Because why not? It's actually coming together pretty quick. Let's go into 3D assets. And there's got to be like a rock in here, right? Just type rock. we spell it correctly. Let's see what we get. These are all pretty big. Boulder, is it Boulder? Do I not have any boulders in this project? I find that hard to believe. But there it is. There it is. So what can we do instead? We can do some 3D plants instead. That's fine. We'll get some acacia. Are these going to come out giant? Sometimes megascans come out giant. No, they won't come out giant. Great. So with everything still paused, I'm going to start dragging in some acacia. Why not? And then on ground 1, I'm going to think about maybe some barley. Well, yeah, see what I mean about giant. Let's do 0.1, 0.1, 0.1. Is that still like enormous barley? No, that's kind of nice actually. Okay. And we'll keep on going. 0.1, 0.1. Yep, oh, we're locked. Great, I don't even have to be typing it 3 times. Look at that. Unreal Engine, Houdini Engine got my back. 1 more. Cool, so now we've got this highly plausible cypress barley forest out here in the desert. You know, it's receiving lighting, it's instancing, it's drawing weird LODs when you get really close because it's speed tree. It's you know, doing all of the things that you would expect it to do. But let's say we didn't want it there anymore. Let's say that we decided that over there is actually terrible and we want it over here instead, or else the director will never start the shoot. We just resumed the engine cooking. That's for shooting commercials. I don't think that the virtual production film people are going to have to sweat that so much, but if you shoot commercials, you feel me. Right there is cool, but let's see what happens if we pop it on the slope. So now I left the engine cooking, and it won't usually start cooking before it stops moving. And great, so now I've got that one. And let's say that we want to make another one. I am going to just copy it out, and I'm going to also alt drag my cube out, and I'm going to say to Quickland Scatter 2 that instead of using cube 1, I want you to use cube 2. Use cube 2. Use current. There we go. It's going. It's instancing all of its forest. Auto saving out of date packages. When this is done, we might get to see the forest be popped up. There we go. Great. Cool. So now we've got these 2 forests, and we could even move this cube and glue them up a little bit. And this one is honestly a pretty tweaky asset, so I don't want to get too heavy into it, but if we wanted to, we also could, you know, sort of change the shape of this. Maybe it's global seed on tree 2 to be more interesting, make you like 3. That should give us just a different result, but everything in the same place. Great. And let's go for a close-up on our cypress barley forest. Cypress barley hill. Cool. So there's some funny stuff that happens with LODs, and this isn't a tutorial on optimizing your level and managing all of that, but if you're seeing it and you hate it, as I so frequently do, it is Foliage Force LOD 0 to do things you're scattering with the brush, which this is a good time to show you. We actually can turn these into foliage, or you could do R Force LOD 0, which I'm just going to run real quick. But coming back over to Houdini, here we could see replace with foliage. So this takes instant static message and makes them foliage, and these are, because they're coming out of a height field scatter, I believe these are instant static message. There we go. Instant static message meshes. Wow, I'm having a hard time with that. I can come over here to the foliage browser and I can see these are, all of those same assets that we just had access to in the quickland scatter are now foliage, and my level's running that much faster when I'm over near them. I could feel it just in how I'm able to scrabble around. Yeah, so this is like a pretty high level overview of the Houdini engine. Just at the very end of it, real fast, I'm going to make the simplest Houdini digital asset. So this is not a modeling tutorial. We are going to make a box with a hole in it, and the hole is going to be like an even amount of distance from each face on the box, and we're going to be able to set that with a control. So we have our box, and we're going to make an additional box, and we're going to make a null, and on this null we had a float. Okay, we're going to call the float box rim size. Control C, Control V. So now I've got a float parameter called box rim size right here. And maybe I want to just open this up again, and I want to set the range on box rim size so that it's not too extreme in that I don't make it invisible, and it's not too extreme in that range view there, because I don't think I'm ever really going to want to be flipping it up to 10. We will hit apply, accept, and now I've got this number here. I'm going to copy the parameter, and I'm going to say that, actually no, I'm going to copy this one first. Copy parameter, come over to box 2. So that box 2 is the same size as box 1, but in X and Y, it's going to copy parameter. We're going to subtract that size, right? That cut size that we want. Nice. Make that small so it's not going to be too extreme. And then we will come back over here and do the same thing in Y. So now we got that. And if we bool, I believe it will default to subtract anyway. But if we bool, right, we can see that we have this procedural box situation. Cool. If I wanted to make this an HDA, there would be just like best practice stuff I might do. I would maybe UV unwrap it and take a look at my UVs and decide that they can definitely be like a little bit bigger. And maybe bring this down to 0.4. I think that'll work for light maps too. That should be fine. Great. We will select all of it. Assets, new digital asset from selection. I'm just going to keep with convention and call this SVGS whole box. I was going to call it square shelf, but it's not very Kallax because it's only got the thick sides. It doesn't have the thin bits. So we'll upgrade it to Kallax, SVGS Kallax at some point. Hit accept, and now we're gonna have a very familiar looking interface that you guys just saw from when I made that parameter before. Now what we're doing, just to kind of describe it, right, is we just put all of those nodes inside of a subnet, and you can put subnets out and you could put nodes inside of subnets without making them Houdini digital assets. Sometimes you might do this if, organizationally, like you don't like having multiple control nulls. You would rather have, all of your associated control-y bits that are going to be on one chunk of your patch inside of a subnet. I'm not sure, why you might want to do this, but if you were to want to put things in subnets, you totally could. However, once they're in a subnet, they're also able to be, just like I was saying, addressed from this top level, right? So when we're making an HDA, what we're doing is we are bundling up all of these nodes inside of a subnet. We are publishing a certain number of inputs and outputs. We are putting names on those published inputs and outputs. So we will call this box out. And we are usually putting parameters on the node as well. There's some other things we can do. We can include files. I'm not going to go over this today, but know that you can do it is we can include files, so things like textures or other HDAs. That's easy to do. You can script up a lot of what I'm going to be showing you, so you could maybe script up how certain menus read other menus. But where we're going to focus is on this parameters page. So if I come inside my subnet, adding parameters is as easy as just drag and drop. So I got my box rim size, and then I got size. What size? I'm going to label it box size. How about that? And then I don't think I need to call this box rim size on the label. I can just call that rim size. Great. It's going to have a material when it comes out. And I think that will just about do it. Apply, accept. The most important step, assets, save asset. There we go. You can save the asset while having the window open, but if you have not applied the changes that you made in that window, then you won't see them shake out. So let's come back to our Unreal level and go to HDA folder. I'm just going to drag in the HDA that we just made, which is right here, whole box. So elegant, so classic. Whole box. This is what you need to get through quarantine is a nice whole box. And you can make one, and you can make them as different as you want, and you could previs them and render them nice and put some crazy textures. Let's go to Megascans and see how it receives. This doesn't make any sense, but marble floor. Why not? Yep, that's way too big. What's going to be a fun one? Damaged fort wall. Yeah, this should be pretty extreme. Lovely. So yeah, now we've got this nice marble. Slow down our camera. This nice stone box sitting in the middle of our instanced forest, and it, I didn't have to paint all of this, right? Like, this is what really drove me to create this scatter system. Is I really don't love painting as like a primary mode of broad expression. I find it kind of coarse and hard to get nice details out of. I have to paint them, and if I want to change them, I have to paint on top of them, and I don't really love that. Instead, we can instance everything, and just like before, I wanted to change something, I could change it here too, and it's just going to bake nice and fast because this one doesn't really have anything going on. So what's actually happening is in the background, like Unreal is sending all of these instructions right here to like a headless Houdini running around back there. That's then going to chuck back this mesh and let us further use it in the Unreal Engine. And I'm going to come back to the documentation, and now that we've got a little bit of context, I want to draw attention to the outputs page. So this is what you can make, right, with the Houdini engine inside of Unreal. You can make static meshes, so you can make stuff. You can make instant static meshes, so you can make instant stuff, and you can make landscapes. There's some very new, like relatively cutting edge Niagara tool development, but it's pretty advanced, and if you're new to both Houdini and Unreal especially, I would say that it would probably be a little bit easier to just keep focus on what is inside of this documentation here. However, keep in mind that you can use these instant static meshes and these static meshes the same way that you could any other inside of the Unreal. So if you have particle looks, for example, that cook to a static mesh, you could totally generate one. There's also nothing stopping you from using the HDAs inside of the Unreal Engine to generate skeletal meshes. This isn't something that our studio deals with too much, but Unreal and Houdini do also have some cool workflows that they could do together for an animation pipeline. And I think honestly that this is a pretty good place to wrap this up. We will probably do some more tutorials on some advanced HDA building, but in a very broad stroke way. If I was going to go in depth about how I made any one of these HDAs, what I would actually be doing is giving you a Houdini tutorial. It wouldn't be an HDA tutorial anymore. That's really the beauty of the of the entire HDA kind of mindset, right? Is instead of having your geometry really live as this, maybe it's funny to think about alembic as static, but this relatively static pile of points inside of an alembic or an FBX file, you can instead be associating, data with other data as part of your compositional practice. And that's been, I think, super powerful for both myself and my partner as designers, and as we're getting to work in 3D, because for entertainment especially, it's not necessarily this giant barley. This is terrifying. Tiny acacia and giant barley. Where are we? What is this strange unknown place? For entertainment, like a lot of the time, especially coming from theater, I think about like prop closets, and I think about warehouses full of set pieces, and I think about how what we're doing is really built on a practice of like grabbing a treatment or a script or a concept and some concept art, and then looking at maybe what's already been done and seeing how you can develop it towards what you're looking at in the treatment or concept art or whatever, right? The Houdini engine can be, I think, a really strong component of a digital backlot, and I'm excited to see, what everybody starts churning out as we all drag up our bootstraps and get ready to start virtually producing. I think we're gonna need like a lot of different sets, and I haven't found a better way than the Houdini engine to manage not only sets but like changing things, right? Because maybe, especially as people start collaborating and as projects start getting a little bit more complicated, not everything can be in the hands of a single artist, right? You might not feel good for whatever reason about asking the artist who was responsible for this box to make you another version of this box, but where the cut side is very precisely 0.45, because that's what needs to happen for tomorrow or whatever. In the real world, I think the note is often much more complicated than that. But one of the benefits of real-time technologies, and specifically like working in this exposed control paradigm, that would say that the same is true for Notch or Touch Designer, for example, is that we're able to, as artists over here in Houdini, right, work with our artist colleagues over here in Unreal to make their life easier. So, if we're making shapes, right, we can imagine. I'm gonna go back to the coffee table just as a quick example, because I think it's actually nice and clear. I'm gonna put my box on top of my coffee table, and we'll put our coffee table on the ground there. Yeah. This is a giant box. I guess I could address that, couldn't I? Yeah, I totally could. I'm just going to Control-Alt-P, and I'm going to scale you like... I'm not going to scale you, actually. I'm going to change your size altogether to 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, and we'll make the box rim size 0.125. Let's see it. Great, so now we've got a much more reasonable box. And yeah, what I was just saying was that it might not always be the right move to go back to the artist, for whatever reason, whether it's time or budget, or they'll get mad at you, or whatever reasons do come up as we're doing all of these projects. The Houdini engine has been a really great way for me to sign, do what I can to kind of manage the notes that I see coming. And I'm excited to develop that specifically more over the next season or two. Um, the last note I want to leave you with is that Houdini is extendable, right? And so is the Houdini engine. However, this is where things get a little bit tricky and we kind of veer off into hard mode. When we deviate from the nodes that ship with Houdini, so for example, I've got mops and we've got the amazing animatrix tools. These are honestly really great. Links, even labs. Actually, I'm not sure if labs is necessarily always part of every Houdini install, though I don't see who wouldn't put it in there. You need to make sure that your target Unreal box, because in many cases it won't be the box that you're using as the Houdini artist. You want to make sure that your target Unreal box has all of the same nodes available to it. So, all that means is that you want to be a little bit mindful of how you're managing things. And our solution for this is to drop a folder in C called Houdini plugins. And this one's a little bit silly. It's got a couple of things in there. In particular, this Megascans plugin that I wouldn't usually put in there. This is the Megascans plugin for Unreal Engine. But the rest of this, this is how I get to the extension tools I use with Houdini. So if I'm going to be setting up a new station, it's super trivial for me to, even if I'm not able to be at that station, like I have to give somebody some instructions and ask them to help me out. It's real easy to say, just unzip this folder, make sure it's called Houdini plugins, put it in C, and then if you use the relatively new, I have a feeling that most people who are Houdini users are going to know about this, but if you were to use the relatively new Houdini package system, all you would have to do to then make that visible to the engine is put this little tiny JSON file, or the appropriate one for the library that you're extending, up in your Houdini environment. The other option, and I find this one a little bit kludgier, is to put everything in OTLs. And I tend to do this as like an artist, like here working on my stations, but I don't love relying on this location on machines that I'm not managing, just because sometimes somebody might accidentally delete something or whatever. So my recommendation is, as much as possible, would be to pick a spot, and this is the one I use, especially on machines that won't see the internet. This is our easy solution, but pick one that works for you and make that where you write things, so that should you want to use the mops instancer, for example, inside of the Unreal Engine to put some cool clones out there, it'll know where to find the nodes. I think that about covers sort of a high-level overview of the HDA. So just to wrap up and review, HDAs, Houdini Digital Assets, let you use certain features of the Houdini code base inside of other pieces of software, in particular Unreal Engine, Unity, Maya, 3D Studio Max, and Cinema 4D, with the Cinema 4D method for acquiring the plugin being a little bit different from everybody else's. You can also use HDAs inside of Houdini. They speed up a modeling workflow. They make it a little bit easier for artists to work together, like especially if both of them are using Houdini. And they also make it easier to adjust the parts of a model that you're going to have to adjust. And once we're in the Unreal Engine, it's just worth keeping in mind that you're going to want to know as you're working with your HDAs what you have to do to drive them. For example, they've got different sorts of inputs that they can be given, and you just want to make sure that you're working with the HDA as it is intended to be worked. And as long as you keep all those things in mind, especially if you're making your own HDAs, I found this honestly so much less frustrating than like any other similar sort of a plugin paradigm. Um, After Effects plugins can tend to be like very complicated situations. Audio situations you can see this light map needs a little bit of work. We could be tweaking that. Everything is everything is here, right? So yeah, this is where I'm going to wrap it. If anybody has any questions, you can feel free to pop me a message. And yeah, I am excited to see what everybody does. Bye.